afternoon, everybody. My name is Matti van Buul. Very welcome to this Media and Learning Higher Education webinar on how medical doctors and developers collaborate to develop educational XR applications, which is a part of the Media and Learning Association Higher Education series of workshops and seminars. As I said, my name is Matti van Buul. I am from the Media and Learning Association, and I'm very happy to welcome you. It's not a very large group that we are, but I'm sure we have a very interested and select group of participants. Before we really start, just a couple of house rules. Please keep your camera on if you can, and if there is no disturbing background with you, so that our presenters and everybody has kind of a friendly face also to look at while we are talking, and to get a little bit of a real group feeling. Keep your microphones, on the other hand, on mute, unless there is something that we need to hear, but keep that maybe until the Q&A moments that we have later on in the session. And also one other thing for house rules, if you can, please add your full name and the name of your organization on your profile, on your self-image. So that is, if you hover over your name and you write and you click on the little 3 dots, you can rename your profile. Please put there, if you can, the name of your institution as well, so that we see who you are. So we're not going to do a full round of introductions. Maybe you can do that when you're asking your questions. Please briefly introduce yourself. Okay. 3 people that I will introduce are our 3 contributors. They're all working with different modes of mixed and extended reality in the medical domain. We're going to start with Stéphanie Vanneste from KU Leuven in Belgium. Then we will listen to Linda Lancere from the Vidzeme University of Applied Sciences in Latvia. And we come back in the end to listen to Sven Graindor, also from KU Leuven. As I said, you will have the opportunity to ask some questions after every presentation. We will take 1 or 2 pressing questions immediately, but after the last presentation, we will have some time for question and discussion with everybody as well. So if in the meantime you have questions that you want to have noted or answered, you can also put them in the chat. Please, every question that you think of, or comments, or if you have suggestions, remarks, suggestions for links or own presentations that you want to draw everybody's attention to, please put them in the chat so that we can share them. What we will do after this session, we will collect all the useful information that comes through the chat. We collect also the presentations and the recording. As you have noticed, we are recording this session. We will share all this, the recording, the notes, the presentations with you all when you have registered for this session. Okay, good. So, but before we start with the first presentation, I would like to get an idea from all of you, like what you are already doing with XR. So just quick idea to get a feeling of what you're doing. What is your experience with XR? Are you already doing it? Are you not doing it yet? Are you planning to do it? What is our audience today? So I see the majority at the moment is doing it. Well, it's kind of even, this 50-50 doing it or not yet doing it and planning it. So 50-50. Okay, good. Let's then have let's look at the results. Here they are. So 50% is doing XR, and the other 50% is not doing it yet, and the minority of these are planning to do it. I hope then you'll get some nice, interesting information from our presenters of today. So I would like to get started with the first presenter, not taking too much time. And I would like to introduce you to our first presenter, Stéphanie Vanneste from KU Leuven. She's an educational researcher at ITech, which is involved with the design of innovative technology in the classroom. if I'm correct. She has 14 years of teaching experience in secondary education, and currently she's working on collaborative problem solving in virtual settings in the Smart Collaboration Tutor project. This is a simulation training in virtual reality to help improve the communication skills of medical students. So, Stephanie, the microphone is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm just setting my timer because I know I have issues with timing and I see my presentation stuck. I hope it's getting better. All right, don't we all love technology? Okay, all right. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. If we're talking about medical doctors and developers working together, we can't forget, of course, our researchers, and I'm one of them. I'm working at ITIC from KU Leuven, but for this project of Smart Collaboration Tutor, we are working with another research group of IMEC, and that's MICT from UGent. All right. First of all, if we develop something, we started with a setting and a problem. And as a faculty, we want our students to become great something. And for our faculty of medicine, we of course want them to become good doctors. And if we look at Netflix, maybe we don't get always the great examples. So we checked a framework, and it's the one of CanMeds, and it shows us some core competences of a doctor, a future doctor. He or she has to be a medical expert, of course. And on the left side, you find more cognitive based skills like being smart and know a lot of of diseases. But on the right side, you find more the soft skills. Those are actually also necessary. Being a good communicator, a good collaborator, being a leader. And those are all soft skills that remind us that a problem should be tackled in group. And if we're thinking about that, we're thinking about collaborative problem solving. So we use the framework of it. It's a CPS framework used also at PISA researches. Vertically, you see the steps necessary to solve a problem, and horizontally, how to do it in groups or with someone else. So when we're combining everything, we get 12 different skills. Those are a lot. So if we're looking at the current way of learning some skills, we do it a lot in simulation training. And of course, in simulation training, which is organized very well at our faculty and a lot of faculties, but we have some thoughts like from data. If we want to see how good they work in groups, we need great data, and the coach can't cover it all, of course. Secondly, the manual analysis is also time consuming. So we first had a whole simulation training, and at the end, we get analysis by video or by observations of the coach. Of course, the feedback is brought back to the student at the end, which is not always that easy or that good, because feedback, you should give it right away. And if we look at the requirements, the dolls, the instruments, those are also expensive. And we also need the coach to give support, to evaluate. So if we look back, we should find a solution to gather more valuable and reliable data. We should get a good analysis, good debriefing mode. We should give feedback right on time. And we don't always need the coach to be there. And our solution, we can find it in virtual reality. So we have made an intervention with the two research groups of IMEC, and in a broader project of Experience Twin, which builds digital twins, we have created a new learning space, a virtual one. And this virtual one, we have the Smart Collaboration Tutor, a tutor who helps them to solve the problem in groups. We're doing research. So first of all, we want to map and measure how two students are working together and going to do some CP or enhance their CPS skills. They communicate well, they try to solve the problem in groups. But of course, we want that new learning space to be very effective. So we will going to measure as well. We're going to give them this feedback and coaching during the session in real time, and we're going to do it by nudging. I will talk about it later on. Okay, we have virtual reality experts, but of course we need simulation training expert as well. And we had collaboration with 3 amazing women. Eva, Tessa, and Caroline are simulation coaches, and they helped with us to get a great scenario, but also to provide us a lot of students for the pilot study and for the experiment to gather a lot of data. I want to focus on a few steps we have taken before the experiment, during the experiment, and after. As McKenny and Rees say, for design-based research stages, you have to make a great analysis, put on a design, evaluate, and always take that feedback in a loop so we can really enhance our situation. And we have done that. So we have written a scenario with our simulation coaches, and we took the case of instable anger. And we took into account that we had to write a scenario based on a multiplayer scenario, so we could introduce some roles and tackle some typical problems during simulation training. Because of the stress, a lot of students forget to do some steps like the ABCDE methods, or they forget to check the monitor or look at the critical parameters and so on. So we put that all in the scenario that we could really trigger those moments that students could learn. And then we have built, of course, our digital twin, but always looking back and looking from some suggestions from our simulation coaches. For example, on the pictures you can see like purple boxes. Those are giving feedback, or those are giving some information. For example, are the ribs, are there rib fractures, or what's the heart rate of the patient as well. So the students can get that information without the help of the coach. Okay, now the experiment. In the experiment, we have a room where the students are doing the whole diagnosis, and at the right side you can see the coaches. They are in a separate room. They have a coach view on the big screen, and they also have a dashboard. We are going to evolve to a fully automated version, but in this stage we still need the coaches, of course, to go through the whole simulation training. At the dashboard, you see the different methods like checking the airway, then the breathing, the circulation, and so on. Some things are already checked up automatically, but for some, this coach still need to do some checkups. But at the bottom, you find at the right side that the coach can trigger the students by changing, for example, the heart rate or the blood pressure or saturation. At the left side, you can see that the coaches can give the students nudges. So the manipulations trigger some learning processes, but also the nudges. And those nudges are giving procedural information at the moment they really need it. And we had 2 types, a red dot or a textual one. It's given to the student individually. They can see it in their headsets. For example, to talk to the patient, and then they could say to each other, maybe you should talk to the patient or listen to the patient because maybe he's offering some interesting information. The debriefing, I will talk about it later, but it's actually our focus for this year. We want to give to the students a summarized, great debriefing with the critical points, and so they can look back and really learn on how this session went. About nudging, we all have been through it during COVID times when we're not really, it was said we should keep distance, but sometimes you found some circles on the floor to to make you aware that we should keep distance, like also on the pictures, like in the men's bathroom, in the men's toilet, or just hinting the people to use the stairs instead of the elevator. Okay, I should show you how the experiment went. So you get...
Hartslag normaal een beetje zacht.
Okay, it's in Dutch.
Okay, we gaan een bloeddruk aanhangen, meneer. Een bloeddrukmeter?
Oké.
Ja, ik wil ondertussen EKG iets uithangen. Die worden aan de perifere pulsaties zien.
Ja.
Het is verzacht, maar of zou het veranderd zijn? Maar wel, dat is niet rekening voor met de net.
Okay, so you see the one is really looking at the monitor, and the other one is keeping track on the patient.
Help me.
Oei, ja, ik ben even perifere pulsaties in de lies aan het nemen, maar het is eigenlijk even moeilijk. Want het was zachter aan de pols. De hartslag zachter aan de pols dan aan de lies. Ja. Die bloeddruk ga ik opnieuw inzetten.
Patient
Pain
is...
gaat niet over.
Yeah, it's expressing his pain.
Ik heb niet veel veranderd. Ja. Luister naar patiënt. En heeft u heel veel zeer, meneer?
Ja,
Dan
geef
moet
maar
ik
iets.
van pijnstelling een beetje geven.
Ja.
Ja, net op schaal van 0 tot 4 dat die 11. Ja, ga u...
Okay. So you see that they're interacting with each other, also with the patient, and someone was mentioning, we who got a nudge that we really should listen to the patient as well. So this way they are tackling the problem, they are really discussing what's going well and not, but they actually learn how to communicate on setting the diagnosis. Of course, we're doing research, so we get audio to look for CPS related language, like are they dividing the roles, getting also track on eye tracking, it's in the headset, what are they looking at, the log data when the nudges were sent, are there interesting moments, and we also had survey because, for example, personality is very interesting when we're talking about soft skills. Okay, so the dashboard is giving us the briefing, mirroring actually the behavior of the students and showing us the critical moments as well. And if we look back at the research questions and experiments, I'm just showing very quickly the first results, like the nudges. The students found it very supportive. Not really that disturbing, and they preferred the text over the dot because it helped them more than just showing the dot. But some didn't see really the nudge as well, and some felt a bit like stupid that they overlooked something. It got a bit frustrated. Okay. For user experience, a lot of students were very enthusiastic and want to continue doing simulation training in XR. They really found it added value to their simulation training. As we looked at the qualitative data, they had less stress. If it felt actually real, it was a valuable tool. But also the coaches found it something, it was alike when they did it in reality as in virtual reality, and they offered some great opportunities for the future. So in summary, we could say that the trainers could understand better the student behavior. They could really exercise on the issues I mentioned in the beginning. For each student, they have some extra alternatives for working in simulation, and they have some great guiding and debriefing moments. And for trainees, they could practice now independently. They don't always need to coach. And the nudges were really helpful, and they get a better insight in their behavior. And now they had a debriefing based on authentic data and not only the observations of the coach. Okay, it's so hard, 12 minutes, but okay, maybe there are some questions already.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. That's quite impressive, very interesting. And indeed, it deserved another 12 minutes to go into the detail. Yeah. So I don't see any questions unless somebody wants to raise a question. Please raise your hand or put it in the chat. Or if I don't see one, yes, Anke, may I ask you to unmute and ask your question? Please go ahead.
Hi, Stephanie. Very
Hi,
nice thing that you did. Very nice.
Yeah.
So it was in research that you did this. It was a kind
Yes.
of a project that you did this. But
Yes.
But you will continue it. You will continue with the project or with the tool. In fact,
It is. Yes.
is there still more research
Mhm.
onto it as well, and
Yeah.
development as well?
For the next years, so this year we're focusing on getting a real debriefing. So we asked the students what debriefing would you like, and also for the coaches. So we're working on it to select the most important moments from the session. That's our first, and then in the next years we will focus on the automatization of the whole project. And we would like actually. We've asked our colleagues from Vives who are working with nurses to also work with us, so to have their insight and their coach. But it would be very lovely if we could do it with other faculties of medicine as well, and maybe even with hospitals who are actually trying to keep on training their staff to do that as well. So we're working every year on it. Yeah.
Thank you. Mark Graner from Radboud, you have a question too?
Yeah, thanks for a very interesting insight in your project. I was wondering, what are the triggers for the nudges? So how do the coaches decide to give a trigger?
Yeah.
And what are your thoughts on just letting the students explore and, you know, make mistakes? So and how much time do you give them before they intervene as a coach?
Yeah. Now we're doing just research to get insight in the behavior of students and coaches. So now we are actually let the coaches think aloud. So now we're just measuring how much time is needed before the coaches give the nudge, and they're giving intention or talking to each other. It's not going well. This way would like making about, for example, if it's 20 seconds, we will do the automatization on 20 seconds after something. For example, as well, if they are too much stuck in the first method, like checking the airway, if it takes too long, we will set a timing on it. And if they will cross the timing, we'll give the nudge as well. Okay, something like that. And of course, students will get the time and the experience to train on it. So we will give them feedback on how the session went, and they can learn from it and doing another cause as well, another disease. And this way they will learn from it.
Thank you. I think we'll have more questions at the end of the session, so we'll keep them for then after we have listened to the last presenter. And I would like, without much further ado, to move to our second presentation. For that, we move to the other side of Europe, to Latvia, in fact, to the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, because Linda Lancere is at this moment in the States. So thank you for getting out of bed very early for us. She obtained her PhD in medical engineering and medical physics at Riga Technical University. She continued then her postdoctoral research at Vidzeme University of Applied Sciences, and at the moment is carrying out research at this university together with European University Alliance in the EUDRES project in the area of wireless sensors, mixed reality, physical therapy service design field. Linda, you have our attention.
Yeah, good morning. And thank you for the chance to be here. It's always nice to tell about your work and see the interest in it. Do you see my screen?
Not yet.
No?
Not yet.
Wrong button then. Okay, now you should see
there.
it.
Yes, you can go in presentation mode.
Okay, so I will also put the timer.
Yeah, okay, well, great.
Okay, so just quickly running through, you will have this in a recording. I'm from Virtual Reality and Smart Technologies Lab, which is active from 2010. So we've got quite some experience in different functionalities in VR and AR. So I will tell you about 2 projects and lessons learned during this time. There are quite many of them. Since I joined the university and started this project with only background in medical engineering and physical therapy and some part of VR project management. So getting into development was very interesting, so to say. So this first project is a mixed reality solution to help and learn how to activate deep muscles, which are very hard to detect, but they are very, very important because they dictate how our all endurance is, because their task is this long working periods to hold us up and so on. So the result was deep core muscle activation, deep breathing training, and several exercises to activate these muscles. And so for that, we used muscle activity sensors, surface electromyography, also heart rate measurements. And we also used electrocardiography and oxygen saturation measurements for monitoring. Like I will tell you why. Because our first testing group was leg amputees, and this population has very common secondary conditions with heart diseases and so on. So basically, what we did is we put the muscle activity sensors on the patient, put the headset on, and then made them exercise. So this is an example of this one of the versions. There were quite a few of them. And the idea here is that they are guided using this animation, basically, and it is connected with the sensors. So in this case, if the data to the headset comes in and it shows that the person is doing the inhalation with their stomach, then the animation is happening and the flowers are blooming and dragons are flying. And also the same goes for muscle activity. But if the data is not coming in, then this animation is stopped. And also you saw this exercise. Well, basically the aim was to initiate these preferred movements without just with the animation, just with this engaging environment, and yes, that was the aim, to do this without these, I don't know, with an instructor in front of you. So that was one version. The next version was way more simplistic, and here you can see a guy doing his exercise, and here is the user interface and muscle activity data coming in, and steps going forward. So in this case, the physical therapist is able to change the order of exercises, or if the patient doesn't succeed that well, then they are able to go backwards and start from scratch with the exercises, and also change the repetitions and so on. And this is what they saw now in this version. So the circle is filling based on the incoming data from the sensors. So you see very simplistic time countdown, and again, the person is inhaling. Okay, Okay, so overall, over 3 years, we tested this solution in 9 institutions. We made 3 human studies and did the surveys with the physical therapists and in private and governmental institutions to align this content. So a little bit more about the road, how it went, because in these kind of projects, it's the interesting part and also challenging part is to have this meeting, this physical therapy, sensor, data, mixed reality, development worlds. So this was the beginning of the road, and this is how my ideas looked. What should I, what would I want to test? So this is all from physical therapy perspective. There's so much detail and so much to explore to prove this physical effect of, like, if you want to prove that these exercises are actually working for the person and they're actually improving this muscle activity. Many factors to consider, plus also the fact that if you want to actually validate any physical therapy solution, which is innovative, then of course, as in science world, it happens, you need to put some kind of reasoning behind it. But the problem is that at that time there was no background to put behind, because in physical therapy, all the surveys and physical therapy tests are manual. So I'm not able to just record the data and then say that this works. So in this all scientific procedure, you are like obliged to include all these, let's say, old school methods to prove that it's effective. This was the result after brainstorming and doing many lab tests, and this was the setup. So the blue, yeah, I didn't describe, sorry. The blue dots here are the places where sensors were supposed to go and muscle activity data was supposed to be measured. So this is the final setup. And here also comes the reasoning for, of course, sensor setting up time. And since the ambition of the project was to make it as practical as possible, then of course we can. It's not the best idea to use 20 different sensors, and also the time for data processing. This is also one more lesson learned. So when you want to measure many metrics, then you need many devices, and this was the initial idea. But when you tell the developer that, okay, we want to integrate these nice devices, and he starts telling you how much time it will take and how much processing will need to be done, then you start to reconsider what is really important in the process. So we were left with muscle activity, since that shows in the best way this information about muscle work. If that would be movement monitoring, then our bodies are very smart. We can trick our trainers. We can do the movement, but not activate the muscles, the target muscles. So muscle activity was chosen, and deep breathing. Yeah, and also from lessons learned from this practical point of view is these closed and open systems when you want to integrate the sensors. it was very important for us to also try blood sugar monitoring, but then these systems are very closed and you're not able to integrate them in the actual solution. Yes, this is the roadmap, and it took really a lot of time because you need to test which exercises are really effective for your target. Again, this is where the new world and old world meets, because nobody has really, well, not nobody, but very few people have actually tested the efficiency of these exercises in the relation to deep core muscles. So this was what was the initial idea, and many tests were made and to make sure which are the most relevant readings, and we were left with only 5 exercises to validate that this concept really works. And maybe it wasn't probably the best way, but that's how it went. First, we tested with just giving feedback on the data, raw data itself. Then these animations were developed, and we figured out that it's, well, not always leading to our target movement. And then there was this simple feedback only at the end. And okay, so yeah, and then there's also this big challenge in tech validation, especially in physical therapy, is that you want to try and test and prove this physical therapy effect, but then it must be a long-term study, and you are kind of forced to stay with this. Well, with the long-term study, I mean exercising 3 times a week for several months. But what you are forced to end up is that you just do this one-time session with or without headset, just to, if you want to prove that this technology works. Yeah, I am short on time already, so we did these surveys. What is important here is that physical therapists said, one of them said, I would need only 5 minutes to get introduced to the solution. Others said, well, I don't know, maybe it would be 90 minutes for me to get used to this, to apply in practice. And of course, one immediate thing they said was, how can I add more exercises? How can I modify them? And then again, this is where we meet the technical work. It's like, it's not that easy. And also in the first place, we had only solution where only the patient can engage. And then after these conversations in the process, we understood it's important that also the physical therapist has this accessibility to change things, and it's more important. And I will try and go quickly to the second project, which was developed together also with the Belgian colleagues and also St. Paulton. So this is a virtual reality game this time, but it's also has integrated heart rate sensors. The aim is to improve physical activity. And make sure that we meet these World Health Organization guidelines for physical activity for heart rate and for increasal metabolic energy expenditure increasal. And also we include the socialization option. So why not create this just general exciting game? The problem is that in these general games, you are not able to evaluate this real efficiency. So this is what we came up with. We are able to input this target heart rate, and this game is adjusting the speed and complexity according to heart rate readings. If it goes too high, then it slows down. Also, what were the challenges. Okay, so yes, we had, according to guidelines, we had to include warm-up, strength, and cardio training, and also pay attention to this preferred length of the activity. And I don't know if you have tried VR, but spending like 30 minutes in VR is not always very pleasant, but it is what guidelines dictate you. So, and there again, our developers were, are you sure you want that? And also the challenge was how to make this game exciting for different populations, for different ages, where their perception really, what we tested was that older people really need slower experience, different colors, different interaction with the VR environment. And it also different whether you're you want to win or just enjoy experience. And yeah, according to guidelines, this is how the exercises should look like. And when you show this to technical people, it's like, how should I manage to get people doing this in VR? Because you are not able to see the feet, for example, in VR, track the feet. You're not able to track these preferred movements. Or like what we also saw in testing was that there's one movement, but there are so many ways how to do it wrong. And from physical therapy perspective, it's really crucial that you do that correctly. So it takes a lot of adjustments in user experience, how you show the feedback, how you show these instructions, and so on. But we did have good results and from initial tests, and what was nice to see that difficulty concentrating reduced and eye strain reduced. But it's always tricky to also interpret these theoretical surveys. And yeah, what we saw also was increase from 27 to 43% in heart rate. So that's positive. Okay, so I'm way over time. Thank you. So I'm stopping now.
No problem. Thank you very much, Linda. It was quite interesting. And I see there's a question from Anke, in fact, something that I was also wondering. She's asking about the first project. Was the experience exercise for the people who got the nice animations better than the others? Was it more difficult to read? So you with the dragons, the flying dragons and that stuff. Have you any, I assume this is what you're asking, Anke, otherwise step in, please.
That's what I'm asking, yes. And if the results are different for the training as well.
Well, yes, that was the reason why we went to the simplistic. I mean, there are many reasons why we went to simplistic, because it was, we changed it also from the technical perspective. We needed to, we wanted to cover this need to also add new exercises and also add this physical therapist user UI, this control panel. So we had to change it anyway. But yes, it is really hard and challenging with animations to get the person to do what we want them to do. And people are so creative. So yes, as much as I wanted to do this gaming thing, it's probably some time in future when to discover out how to do that best.
Thank you. I was also reading between the lines when you were referring to some of the design issues during the process. Did you have some frustrating moments where there were kind of design conflicts between the developers and researchers, or did I misunderstand that?
No, there were, yes. It's like, it's how people perceive and how they do the tasks. Like, of course, if you give this task to, okay, I need an instruction, for example, in VR, and they put the instruction, and it's really hard to read it or notice it, or and so on. It's something that where this communication is maximally important because they don't really realize how much it changes this efficiency of performance, or also like in terms of the design and also functionality. If from physical therapy perspective, I want the person to turn their head like 180 degrees, how to ensure that from technical perspective? Because when you put the headset on, it's not that precise. You can measure the movement, but it's never going to be that precise as physical therapy needs. So you need to adjust all the instructions, and then you need to consider whether only visual clues are enough, or you need to give also audio instructions, and in what way. So it's sorry, it's a fun process.
A challenge, and there's room for improvement on the technical part to make all these things possible, I assume.
Yeah.
But that will probably come. But thank you very much, Linda. Maybe there will be more questions after the last presentation of Sven. Let's now listen to Sven. We go back for the last presentation to Leuven. In fact, to Sven Graindor. He's XR developer working with the Biomedical Sciences Group. Sven, the microphone is yours.
Thanks for the introduction, Matti. Hello, and thank you all for attending this event. I'll give you a quick overview about our lab and some of the projects we worked on in the field of medical education. I'm not going to do it as extensively as my previous colleagues. It's more of an overview of the projects we made, and then some of the lessons learned from those projects during the last 3 to 4 years. So first of all, I'm Sven. I'm a developer. I'm an XR developer, and I've worked on many 3D and XR projects in the last 7 years. I worked on financial and medical education, and I'm one of the 3 developers at our biomedical technology lab. And we work for the 3 faculties within the biomedical group. So our goal is to convert skills training from students into 3D simulations. So either it's done in a VR headset or on screen. It depends per project. We have a strong collaboration between educational experts, our skills training center, and of course the medical experts, who usually combine their academic roles. So they are also tutors, but they also usually have a practice role as a doctor as well. So they combine both. And one of the technology we use is Unreal Engine. It's a game engine. And as I mentioned before, we use both headsets. We usually work with the Meta Quest 2, and we also use outputs on screen. So the first project I did when I started the lab in 2019 was a dental prosthesis simulator, which was developed in association with the dental and educational experts. It's a 3D application, so it's not a VR application, with the goal of giving students a better understanding of prosthesis design. So we made the tool for our professor to use in the classroom first. So it's Professor Doug, who is also a medical expert in dentistry, and also a version for students that have some exercises. So you can find some information back on an article that was written some time ago, and it will be provided, I guess, by Dovi in the future. Then the next project we did was Crime House VR. After DPS, we worked with forensic sciences experts to develop what you could say call a crime scene investigation in VR. So it's a 3D VR simulation where students visit several crime scenes while collecting evidence by examining objects, uncovering traces, and establishing a chain of custody. So it's a fully interactive 3D environment. It's not made with 360 images, so it's full 3D. And once when they have completed the investigation, they also get an extensive report from their actions from our analytics environment. So all the projects that we develop also have an analytics environment behind it. So both students and teacher understand what's done in the environment or what's not done in the environment. Then another project we developed at the faculty, who also won a Medea award recently, was Viskilab. It's a 360 video experience where we introduce students to Labo best practices, and it was realized in association with Labo assistants and tutors. And then currently we're working on basic life support. That's a wireless VR application where a physical CPR mannequin and its sensoric data is synchronized with a virtual human, which is then placed in a real virtual environment. So they're actually using the physical mannequin as to get feedback, but what they only see a virtual environment. So that's a very interesting combination, but it's also a very challenging project to do. And we also want to make it as authentic as possible. So we want to get rid of the typical VR controllers. So we use hand tracking and also voice recognition to give orders to the medical staff and so on. If you're interested in this project, there's a very good talk about it at the Medea conference from my colleague Anna Astrid. And she will talk about the development process from start to finish about this project. So that's a shout out to everyone to go and check it out if you're at the conference. So one thing we do is what I think is really working well for us is the collaboration model. And since it's a talk about collaboration, that's something I wanted to emphasize as well. I put it in like 3 domains. We have the nerds, the IT services, the developers and the network engineers. And then you have the medical staff, which are physicians or professors or doctors or whatever with a medical background. And obviously they're not really speaking the same language, and that can be challenging. And what we did from the get-go, and obviously that's a very good thing, that within these faculties there are a lot of medical experts. We work with human interfaces. So those are people that are bridging the gap between the developers and the medical staff. Those can be either educational experts or assistants. Like if a doctor has an assistant or a student who's working with him, they can help us out on filling in these gaps. So sometimes we have a question and it happens a lot that the doctor is not available. Then these human interfaces, as I call it, will help us speed up the answering process. So we get answers much quicker from them. If there's a decision to be made, sometimes they can also decide we're going in that direction or in that direction. They have quite a lot of autonomy as well, and that's going really well. And we use this model actually for all the projects we're doing. So that's going pretty well. So obviously there are lessons learned, and I've made quite an extensive list of lessons learned. So I also have to do some timekeeping there. So I'll talk a little bit faster here. But anyway, I just want to give them to you. First of all, getting started. So whenever you start with a project, you have to know that medical apps and apps for medical education are not the same. That's something we've come across, for example, with our dental simulator, that we got questions from dentists who ask us, can we use it in our practice? Because we want to show it to patients how the prosthesis will look like. And we discussed it obviously, but there's a big difference by using an application with students and using it in a practice of a doctor, because obviously there's a risk of liability. Also the legislation, as soon as you change from an educational context to a medical context, there's a lot of legislation involved. So that's you have to keep in mind that from the start, like, how are we going to position our tool in what way? And once you know how the tool will be used, keep in mind that your application is only as successful as the implementation. So also put a lot of focus in the beginning from day one to how is it going to be used in a day-to-day workflow. Because if the tool in the end is impractical or unreliable, or it takes too much time to set it up, then it will fall into disuse, even if the tool is great on its own. So that's one important lesson to learn there. One thing that we also do with each of the projects I just show you is we always make a proof of concept first, before we actually start with the development of the final project. That way we understand better what the final product will be. Everyone in the team already has some idea of, okay, it's gonna be like that. The dev team also gets a more accurate impression of the complexity. So our estimates will be better because we already have some basic understanding of what we need to build. And it's also a great way to try out the collaboration between the involved parties. And usually we also test our proof of concepts on a test audience and use that feedback to enhance the final project requirements. So working with a proof of concept is, to us at least, very essential to get a good product in the end. And last but not least, and I think Linda also mentioned something about the analytics, and I think Stephanie as well. We also care about the analytics. We're not a research group. We usually use the analytics to get a better understanding how our application is used and how we can improve it without bothering our teachers, tutors, doctors with surveys. So we don't want them to fill out a lot of surveys, but we plug in a lot of analytics in our tool and we try to get an understanding ourselves on how it is used, what errors occur during the process, what the progress is that the students are making, and so on, without having them to fill out a survey. So that's something we spend quite some time on for each project. Like, what do you want to know from the what kind of analytics do you need? Then the communication, of course. ICT developers are not medics, so even though a developer may have a good understanding of the overall goals, it can still be complex to do collaboration because they're, as I mentioned, they're not talking the same language. So sometimes having a glossary with medical terms or images or videos about specific medical equipment could already help the quality of understanding. Then also, well, medics usually don't have much time. I think that's a very important lesson we learned throughout the 3 or 4 years. They don't have much time to attend to meetings or to read mails. And that could, of course, slow down the development process if, as a developer, you really need to have specific answers. So as I mentioned before, that's why we added the role of a human interface, a domain expert, if you will, like an assistant or a medical or educational expert that can help us speed up that answering process. Yeah, and then also, even though the doctors don't always attend to meetings, make sure that you keep them in the loop. And that's something we also learned, that it's not because there's a delay, you should not wait 2 weeks or 1 month with communicating. Try to keep a frequency, a fixed frequency in communication, even if there's nothing to say. It's better to just tell them that we have some delay, and it will keep all the project members more focused on the project. So that's something we also learned ourselves. And as I mentioned before, communication with medics can be challenging because we learned that they get a lot of mail. They get mails about events, conferences, newsletters, studies, and so on. And maybe for some, it will be very recognizable. And that means that our mail is just one of the mails. So I significantly reduced the amount of mails, and instead we use recurring short meetings, like status meetings every few weeks. And that's, at least in my opinion, much more effective than sending questions in mails. Now, since we're developing XR applications, I also put a small topic on VR. VR application has many advantages, but VR applications have their own set of best practices that are different from when you're developing a 3D application. So first of all, the project team should all have a first experience with VR. That means the first thing we try to do when we start developing a VR application is to do some inspiration session where everybody at least understands the concept of VR. Even if you don't have practical applications in your lab, just try to give them some games or whatever, but they do need to understand what the capabilities of the medium are. And then also ensure that your dev team also knows how to develop VR applications, because it's pretty easy to convert a VR application from a PC to a headset, but that's not the same as making a very good VR application in a headset. So wireless mobile VR applications are very challenging because they're limited in resources. And that's a reason that I would definitely recommend anybody who wants to do mobile wireless VR to hire somebody, at least in the beginning, to learn your team some best practices on doing so, because there's a risk of motion sickness. I think Linda also mentioned it in her slides. And it's still a risk. It's reduced. The software and the hardware have some improvements in that area already to reduce it, but we still limit our sessions to maximum 30 minutes. That also means you have to think about how to split up your content so that it fits within these 30 minutes. And then also when working with XR headsets, and that's something we also learned in a rough way, is that you need to have a maintenance plan to keep them updated, to keep their batteries charged, to keep them cleaned, because it wouldn't be the first time that I'm somewhere where suddenly all the VR headsets are updating because there was an update the night before, and so everything was delayed, quite significantly. So it's something we have some kind of plan. We're still learning there, but it's getting better now to keep these devices updated. And then the last thing I want to mention is the testing, something that's often underestimated within a project in terms of the time that's spent to organize these tests, but also the added value of these tests. So at the lab, we do a user test every 3 or 4 sprints, which is about 2 months. Every 2 months, we try our application on our target audience. And also when completing our proof of concept, that's also tested on our target audience. So as I mentioned, test frequently is an important thing. But also add new people, because if you always test with the same people, they get acquainted to the tool, they know how it works, so they are not in the mindset of a new user. So sometimes you need to add a few new people to get a better understanding if your tool is still intuitive after adding many new features to it. Also include a tutorial. So even when in the beginning, even if it's just an image on how to do it, but it helps people to get acquainted very fast. They feel more supported and assured when putting on a headset, because for some people it can still be scary that their mind is showing them a whole different world, and giving them some kind of handle, telling them how to do it, reassuring them that's something that could be very useful as well. Also, don't rely on XR testers. They are the worst testers in the world because they know the tool, they have developed the tool, they walked around in the tool, they don't have motion sickness anymore if you do this every day. So make sure that you put people in a headset that don't have XR experience to ensure that your tool is free of any motion sickness. So don't rely on testers telling you that it's fine. And then the last thing is always test in an actual setting. That's something that's important if you're working with doctors, which if they use it in a medical setting, in a hospital or in their own practice. What's typical is bright lights, reflective surfaces, interference from other electronics. All those things can give you a very bad time if you finally want to try out the VR headset in that kind of environment. So be aware that if that's the environment where you're going to use it, also try it out quite from the beginning there to see that reflective surfaces or the bright lights don't hinder for example, the pass-through cameras and so on. So that's also something we noticed, that also with hand tracking, if you're using hand tracking and bright lights, that's not a good match. So yeah, those are some challenges you will be facing if you don't try it out up front. And basically that's the best practices I wrote down here. I hope it helps you a bit to get started. And I want to thank you for listening, and any questions.
Thank you very much, Sven. And I think some of your lessons learned or recommendations, certainly the earlier ones with regard to communication and collaboration in the team, are probably valid also for many other domains of media production and education. I think so. It's very interesting to get that list of lessons learned. I don't see any questions yet, so I'm going to take advantage of the situation to ask myself a question. This is a very naive question, of course. I see some similarities between your setup or the environment or the assets that you're using and the assets that were used by Stéphanie. How is it with interchangeability or reuse of assets in XR, VR? Is that working? For example, are you and Stéphanie working together and exchanging models, assets, I don't know what?
I guess not. KU Leuven is a very big organization, and we're still trying to connect the dots between all the projects that are using XR. I guess within our group that's going quite well, but I think because Stéphanie is also located at a different site, I think that's already a boundary that we still have to solve. I think we met somewhere in the past, but there's also difference because we are a development lab. We don't do research, so we're not that involved in groups that are also using VR more for research purposes. And I think that's maybe a reason why we haven't connected yet. So I guess no, we don't share resources at this moment.
Mm-hmm. and maybe also a question to Stephanie to open the floor a bit wider. Is there any future for reuse and interchange? Also, Linda, I invite you to join in that as well. But do you know of any initiatives or possibilities of interchanging? I can imagine that everybody wants to be working with some kind of representation, for example, of the human body to some detail. How is that? Are there models and assets available or becoming available?
Maybe I will start with our experience twin. It's really set up from our partners from MICT, who really want to gather everything and everyone who's working on extended reality. It will become a sort of platform in which we can interchange and can use those models. I think XR is still a small world, but we're talking about it and we're exchanging a lot, but not yet on a good core overviewing level. There are some options there left.
Linda, have you any views on that or ideas?
I mean, I totally agree with Stephanie. There's I mean, there's a big room for collaborations, and even in the UDRIS network, like I've been in this network and collaborating with the colleagues in XR for 2 years now, but I never knew that there's Sven. So it's kind of, it's a big challenge. And I think it's crucial to establish these connections between developers and researchers. And I know that actually at this point, there is work going on establishing like digital health innovation hub between the countries. So I really hope that that is our like channel or environment where we will be able to connect and share.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm not going to dominate the questions and answers, so I'm going to maybe refer to the chat. Mark Graner, maybe you want to express yourself, your tips for avoiding motion sickness? Mark?
Yeah, we did some really basic research with different groups of students. Because we noticed some of them got really unwell when wearing the headset, even if it was just a few minutes. So people who are prone to getting sick in a car or when traveling, they're more likely to experience motion sickness when wearing a headset. So that's why, you know, for those people to take some medication that will help preventing getting sick when wearing the headset. And we're currently doing several projects with 360-degree video, where the camera is mounted on a shoulder of the person who is showing certain procedures. And we still think that's the best immersive way when using 360 video. But it increases the risk of motion sickness, because if the camera's here and you're moving around all the time, and the one wearing the headset is sitting still or standing still, that will increase the motion or the vertigo, sense of vertigo. So if anyone has experience with that, please let me know.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much. And yes, indeed, share if you have information about that. And maybe in this context, it's interesting, as Dovi wrote in the chat as well, Media Learning Association is launching a special interest group on XR. And if you're interested, so stay tuned with the Media Learning newsletter. There's more information coming about that, where this kind of tips and tricks and resources and ideas can be exchanged. Maybe while I have time and nobody else is asking a question at the moment, I would like to do a quick round to ask what platform or technology for development that you have used. Sven, you were talking, let's go back to you first. Sven, you were talking about Real Engine. that was your main platform. Any other experiences with?
No, I think in the last 7 years, I usually work with Unreal Engine. We also have Lab that's made with Unity. So we do have both at the university, but we do need to make sure that, of course, it's very hard to maintain two engines and also to have the skill set from two engines, and they are quite different, not in terms of what they can do, but how they build applications. So that's why we focus on one game engine. And to refer to your question about the assets, there are just a lot of free assets because the vendor from Unreal Engine Epic Games is a very rich company, and the CEO is also a real nerd who doesn't care a lot about money. So they just give a lot of free assets to us, which you can use even for commercial purposes, and that's also a very interesting reason for us to choose Unreal Engine, apart from the way that also development is done differently. They use blueprints, and all our developers are using blueprints now. We don't write code anymore the way it is done in the past. And for us, it's a much quicker way of developing applications than writing code. That's what I want to say.
Linda, if I may, what technology did you use in the development?
Well, for us, it was a really complicated question, but of course, by default, for HoloLens headsets, it was Unity engine. But since there is like this data integration involved, and you need to process the data from the sensors, you need to get them to the computer and then to the headsets. Well, basically, when we had the validation study, I had like 5 different programs open just to get it running. So it was, we used Docker and Postman and JavaScript language for these custom programs. And also we used, of course, we had to use these sensor programs in the first place, because it was not, for us, it was not possible to get the data directly from the sensor to the headset or PC. So I'm not a developer, so, but I had to learn all of these weird terms and names of these applications. And honestly, I don't think I fully understand the complexity, how many programs and platforms we have used just to make it work. But yeah, that's the, I believe in VR and in physical therapy, it has no future without the data. So, and of course there are headsets with the sensors already embedded, but then can you pay 30,000 for one headset, and who will actually use it? So you end up, the data is necessary, but the complexity is still there. And I'm really looking forward for the time where we won't need to use 3 different platforms just to validate our ideas.
Thank you. Stephanie?
Yeah, that's actually a question for my colleague, but we're working also with Unity, and I think everybody is looking for development of all of those tools that it make it more usable, not only for the students and the coaches who will work with it, but also for the researchers to get better data from it. Our developers have already wrote some code, for example, in our case, when we are looking for eye tracking data, that it's already been written in the code that it's feasible for us to tackle if they're looking at the patient's face or the stomach or what, that it's more usable for everyone to work with it. Because as a researcher, I'm more focused on collaborative problem solving, and then we use the tool of XR. Wow, a whole new world went open, and you have to discover and translate everything you see in that data. It should be more usable for everyone. So hopefully a new tendency is coming.